The climate phenomenon El Nino is on its way. What it means for the desert.
It has a lot of opportunity to provide a lot of short-term drought relief and some improvements in longer term, but it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve everyone's problems.
More moisture than usual, how Arizona farmers prepare for the rain.
We got to have our equipment in top shape, ready to go, and as soon as the conditions are conducive to harvest, we got to push real hard.
This is Arizona Week. This year's El Nino is expected to be one of the strongest on record, and what it means for Arizona is a much wetter winter. Here's Ken Drews from the National Weather Service in Tucson.
El Nino is a warming in the equatorial or tropical Pacific Ocean, and generally it means it's at least a ½ degree Celsius above normal. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but even strong El Ninos are only greater than 1.5 degrees above normal. So that can really actually affect how the atmosphere works and the circulatory patterns across the atmosphere. So it can affect the jet stream and where it traverses across North America. We started seeing signs of a developing El Nino actually during, I believe, the spring of 2014, and we were thinking that it was going to develop last winter, but it didn't really get going. It kind of waned, and such is the cyclical nature of these things and how the ocean currents move. But it did start then redeveloping during the spring, or late winter into early spring. And actually, in El Nino, I said it has to be greater than a ½ degree above normal for it to be an El Nino. That is not the only requirement there is. You actually, that's measured in 3-month averages. So for instance, February, March, April was actually the first 3-month average where that temperature was greater than a ½ degree Celsius above normal. And you have to have 5 of those, 5 consecutive overlapping 3-month periods. So February, March, April, May, and so on. So really just in the last month or so, when we had July, August, September, when it was also above normal, is when we actually officially had our 5th 3-month overlapping period of above normal temperatures, and we could actually call it an El Nino for the history books.
Do we have an El Nino every year?
No, actually, either an anomalous warming or cooling of the eastern tropical Pacific, one of those two, either an El Nino or a La Nina, the cooling, usually have one of those two every 3 to 5 years. It's a cyclical in nature. They vary. You'll have colder ocean temperatures followed by warmer ocean temperatures, or maybe even longer periods of warmer temperatures. So really variable. It's kind of an irregular pattern. But it certainly has some effects for us, primarily during the cool months is when the correlation is the highest for southern Arizona.
Will our winters be as cold as they normally are?
We're looking at probably below normal temperatures for this winter, for an El Nino winter, if you will. That's not necessarily mean we're going to have really cold nights, but it usually means we're going to have colder daytime highs. The reason being more cloud cover, more precipitation around that prevents the sun from coming out, and you just don't warm up as much during the day. But on the same token, nighttime clouds can act as a blanket and keep us a little warmer at night.
When's the last time we had a strong El Nino?
The last strong El Nino was actually the 97-98 winter. And we did have a large amount of snowfall, particularly on Mount Lemmon and other high elevation mountains in southern Arizona. And we were above normal with rainfall in the valleys as well. We also had a fairly strong, but also only classified as a moderate El Nino in the winter of 09-2010, which most people probably remember that a little bit more than 97-98, but that was certainly was wet as well. It had a number of winter storms come through.
Which El Nino is this one poised to represent?
This one is forecast to be a strong El Nino, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have more rain than what we had during a moderate El Nino, but probably a better chance of that.
Would you describe where El Nino really affects in the U.S.? I mean, what states are usually impacted?
The weather pattern sets up during El Nino such that the southern tier of the United States, from say Southern California all the way through Florida, is generally wetter than normal. The most concentrated area, or the highest probability of having wetter than normal conditions during the winter months, are from about southeast Arizona through about Louisiana in that area. By the same token, because this kind of this southern jet, if you will, is going across the southern U.S., the northern jet is actually even farther north and keeps a lot of the cold air bottled up in Canada. So consequently, the northern part of the United States usually enjoys a more mild winter.
El Nino is considered a climate phenomenon. At the University of Arizona, climatologists and meteorologists study what El Nino means in the short term and what it signals for the long-term conditions. Here's Dr. Michael Crimmins, Associate Professor in the Department of Soil, Water, and Environmental Science.
It's more of a climate phenomenon in the sense of that it's very big scales. I mean, it's covering the actual location of El Nino is in the sea surface temperatures in the tropical Pacific, and the extent of them is now really covering from the East Pacific all the way to the West Pacific. So we look at that whole geographic region to see with El Nino. And then if you imagine that giant expanse of water that's now unusually warm on the East Pacific is sending all this energy in the atmosphere, it has implications for the whole globe. All the weather around the globe actually reorganizes in response to this climate phenomenon over months and over these giant global scales.
Where is all this happening? What does it look like right now?
Okay, so right now, lots of warm water, unusually warm water in the East Pacific. And associated with that warm water is thunderstorm activity along the equator in the East Pacific that's not normally there. Very active. And what it does is it pumps energy in the atmosphere, and basically the global jet streams start to respond and organize around that. So we're still a little outside of the season that this really impacts us. It's really more of a winter phenomenon, but we've seen hints of it even through the summer, and we're now seeing hints of it even in the sort of the weather forecast over the next couple of weeks.
What's it going to look like this winter for us in Arizona?
So again, it's not a weather phenomenon. It's not like a tornado. It's not like a Godzilla, as people have talked about it. It's not gonna have eyes. It's not gonna storm ashore. It's a climate phenomenon. So it's this idea that it sort of shifts in the types of sequences of weather events that we'd expect over the whole spring, from now until basically late April. And this is, I think, also really important, is that we look at these past events. There are runs of very wet periods and wet months in there, but we also have the little trick in there where we can have a dry January, some warm conditions in there. So even if it slows down at any point within the next couple of months, that does not mean El Nino has failed or it's stopped. Most of our activity with these big events really starts to occur in February, March, and April. So I'm even sort of waiting for the end game of this whole thing.
So what will our fall and winter look like?
Well, I think fall, as we're moving into it now, there's still this risk of tropical storms wandering up over Arizona all the way through the end of October. And there's tropical moisture down there that's even getting picked up by passing storm systems to the north. So we still have that risk of even heavy rain events all the way through October. And you think most Octobers, the monsoon ends and it's just, it's hot and dry. The days get a little shorter and it gets a little bit cooler. I think that we're still gonna have the humidity. We're still gonna have that risk of storms. Then once we get into November, we start to shift gears into winter storm season. And then it's kind of November all the way through April that we're going to be at play with where the storm track is. During El Nino events, that storm track is typically further south and more focused on us. So you'd expect to have more rainy day events, more snowpack, just more clouds, and lower temperatures even on that front as well.
Southern Arizona will start to feel a little like Seattle?
Well, and again, it's that we could have these runs of even a week or two where it's raining every other day, which we just don't even see. I mean, that's how focused these storm tracks can actually get. And so, you might have to use an umbrella. You might have to actually look up what a galosh is and wear galoshes or something like that.
Go buy an umbrella.
Exactly, go buy them if they even sell them here in Tucson.
So what does this look like long term? I mean, this is a good sign.
It's a great sign, and again, this is it's a beneficial event. I don't think it's anything we should fear. It's going to bring, I think, quite a bit of precipitation in Arizona, which should help improve sort of short-term drought conditions and make a dent in our long-term drought. It is not a drought buster in the sense that it will solve things that have accumulated over 5 to 10 years, but it's definitely heading in the right direction.
Long term, this doesn't solve our problems, but you've been watching this and you know that it is a game changer for right now.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's gonna drop a bunch of precipitation all over the Southwest, which is great. And it's going to create snowpack. It's going to help the local reservoir situation. But the Colorado River is the Colorado River. It has its own sort of policy and management issues that we've got to deal with in the long term. And as you get to the upper Colorado River basin, the connection with El Nino actually becomes much weaker. So it's not a guarantee that it'll be wet up there. You can have these weird situations where it's very wet in Arizona, but it could actually be maybe slightly below average in the upper Colorado River. So it looks wet to us down here, but then stream flows are actually not as great as we would have hoped come next spring. So And droughts are always around the corner too. That's the other thing, is that, you know, we could very easily slip back into a very dry winter a year from now. That's just kind of up in the air at this point.
Too much moisture at an unexpected time can negatively impact agriculture. In Arizona, farmers tell me they pray for rain and they'd much rather have moisture than a drought. To see this firsthand, we traveled to the Bonita bean farm north of Wilcox. Ted Haas, you own Bonita Bean Company with your brother. How long now?
We bought Bonita Bean, Brent and I, my brother, did in 1998 or 7 or 8. I believe 1997.
Big business in beans for you guys.
We had to have somewhere to go with them. We've been raising beans since my father had his first crop in 1975 when we moved here. And we needed a place to take them, to clean them, to sack them, store them. And some other folks were doing that, and that wasn't working for them. They said, hey, do you guys want to buy it? We said, sure.
Here we are.
So here we are, yeah.
What is it about Wilcox that makes this the perfect climate, the soil, the water for you to run your business?
Beans work well for us because we double crop them. This field that we're in was barley that we harvested in late June, and we didn't disc it, we didn't do anything. We no-tilled, we went in and planted beans right behind the barley combines, which is the same combine that harvests the bean, just at different settings. And it allows us to raise 2 crops in 1 year. We're immersed in a pinto bean market, the Southwest. We have a nice climate here. They like it here. They can't take salinity, so some parts of the states that have higher soil salinities can't grow beans. But we have real good, healthy, non-saline soils here that's very conducive to pinto bean production.
El Nino is expected to be more active than it has been in more than 10 years. Too much water, too much rain can be bad if it's not the right time of season. Is that correct for a farmer?
It is. But as you know, water's our life. So we're thankful for every drop of water that falls in this valley. I can honestly say that. But sometimes it causes us it costs us money, but it causes us harvest delays and loss of quality of our beans. But we're thankful for the rain. And so we look forward to a good El Nino. We really do, because we really haven't had one in a long time. But we're prepared to deal with it and make the best of it.
As a farmer, what sorts of things do you have to do in anticipation of this rainfall? How do you prepare for it?
Well, you really can't. I mean, we planted these beans as soon as we could this summer, so they would be ready as soon as, as early as we could in the fall. Because another threat that we have with beans is a fall freeze. If it comes too soon, it can kill them. Well, we got by that. We haven't froze yet, and we're way beyond where it would hurt us. But we got to have our equipment in top shape, ready to go, and as soon as the conditions are conducive to harvest, we got to push real hard.
It takes about 90 days to grow beans, is that correct?
About 90 days.
So you don't lose any crop, you just have to pull it out sooner?
No, you can't pull it out sooner. You can't harvest before the beans are ready. So if you know there's a big rain coming and your beans aren't ready, you got to sit back and enjoy the rain and wait for the proper time to harvest. It's kind of like wine. We're talking about wine. It's not ready till it's ready.
Do you end up losing crop?
You can. You definitely lose quality. When beans are rained on, they won't be that nice white. The white is white and the pinto part's brown. They'll get an off cast. And they're still the same quality as far as nutritionally, but the consumer, if they're given a choice, they're going to want the nice, bright, clean ones rather than the darker stained ones. You may lose some quantity. It depends on how much rain, but a lot of rain, you can lose quantity just because when the beans dry out, then the pod can shatter. And if that pod pops open when it dries, the beans fall on the ground, you'll never get them then. They're gone then. They have to be in the pod for the combine to pick them up.
Are you looking forward to this winter's El Nino?
Oh yeah, we love rain. I don't want to burst your bubble because we know how much rain, how much we need the rain. And so we've had other wet years where we've got our beans out and we marketed them. It was tougher, it was harder. We had to send out a lot more samples. We took a less of a price for them. But if we don't get rain, we don't farm.
How important is farming to you, to this country?
Well, I think we can export a lot of things in this country, but I think it's very important as a part of public policy that we produce our own food. I think it's good for our country because I think we need rural influences in an increasingly urban culture. So I think a country that can't feed itself can't really do much anymore, it seems like to me. By having a highly efficient agriculture, we free up so many other people to many other pursuits. If we all had to subsist in agriculture, we would never make the gains in all the other sciences.
You heard farmer Ted Haas say it takes about 90 days to grow beans. After the harvest, the beans make their way to the bean facility before they're shipped out. Here's an inside look at the process. Fernando Ferral, you've been the plant manager here at Bonita Bean Company. You've been here for about 18 years?
Yes, 18 years.
What about these silos here? They're pretty big.
Well, that's our storage facility, and that's our first step of our processing. So once we start filling the bins, which each one of these bins holds about 2 million pounds, and each truck, semi-truck, holds about 44,000 pounds.
So how many 18-wheelers are we talking about for one of these silos?
We are talking about legally weight, it's about 45 truckloads.
Those are a lot of beans.
Yes.
So they go into smaller trucks and then you take them into storage.
Yeah, by the time we take him to the truck, we take him to the mill, and that's where everything starts. We put him in the pit, take him by elevators into our bins, and that's where everything starts. The cleaner takes most of the big rocks and pots, fines, and separates the splits. From there, we go into the destoner, which takes care of the rocks, 3/4 and less, or smaller. From this machine, we go into the polisher. The polisher takes the dust, and that's why they look so shiny. From that step goes into the gravity table, which is separating the heavy and the light. So if there is any splits left, that machine will separate them, and also takes care of the bug cut bean, which is the worm damage. From that step goes into our sacking bin, and that's where the bagging line starts.
Then it goes off to the consumer and people like me buy them. You've been doing this for 18 years. This process has gone through a lot of change.
Yep. I remember when I started here, we have very many loads with a lot of high % of dirt. And over the years, all the process has been changing for better. So now we are down to 1.5%. Average. Not every load is the same, but I can say that we done a lot better. And I'm happy to be part of it, of the change. How they harvesting now from the past to today is a lot different.
You've got to be pretty proud that what starts here ends up on tables all across the country.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I like, when people call and they say we got good beans, and they want to come back and buy more. It makes me feel good, makes me put more effort into my job. So, we are doing good, but we can do better. And that's maybe what makes the difference.
From the farm to the table, it's a long process to ensure quality in crops. The Bonita Bean Company takes pride in its work, and here is how it's done. Nikki Terry Hampton, you are the office manager here at Bonita Bean Company. Thanks for
Yes.
having us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You do more than run the office. You also take a really close look at these beans. How does that work?
Yes, every truck that comes into our facility has to be sampled. That way we can stay as consistent as possible in where we actually put the beans so that once we get ready to market them, we have a consistent product to offer our customer. So step one, whenever we offload it from the truck, the sample that is, goes into the moisture tester here. We go through, we have to have them a certain degree of dryness. That way it holds with the consistency of the beans. We can't put wet beans on top of dry beans and vice versa. It alters, number one, the color, and number two, the damage that could potentially be in that bin, because a lot of these beans are going to stay in that bin for the greater part of the year. We do clean out every year, but throughout the year we can't pull every single bean out to inspect it. So we have to keep them as consistent as possible with moisture, damage, etc. Okay. So these ones here are actually 11.3, which is ideal. We accept them anywhere from 13% on down. The drier they are, the more likely they are to break. So at that point, we start having a little bit more damage in the bins, and that's via processing. The longer they sit there, the drier they're going to get, therefore the drier the product is once it comes out. It's going to just have more splits.
So after you gauge the moisture, then what's next?
Then we go ahead and we look at the actual sample. This is the sample that we've pulled from the truck. We go through, we sift it, we decide what we want to go ahead and cull out, which are going to be splits and damage, and any kind of foreign material. Anything that's not a pinto bean, we're going to go ahead and pull out.
Okay.
There is a potential to have other beans in these, say black beans and things like that. Very few and far between, but that's still considered a foreign material because it's not a pinto bean. Okay. So we will go through, and as we're picking through and deciding what we're going to keep and what's not going to be put into a bag per se, we are actually keeping in mind what each of our bins already has in it. If it's the first load, it's relatively easy because there's nothing to compare it to. Whereas now we're about 50% in, so we have quite a few options to look at. So what we'll do is we'll look at color-wise first and see which one it's the most consistent with. So you'll want to see if it's lighter, darker, if there's more eye catchers, if you will. Example, that kind of yellower tint there is more of an eye catcher than all these others here. The darker ones, they're still good beans. They're just a little bit darker in their coloring. Again, still a good bean.
So Nikki, these two examples, can you explain what the difference is and what the consumer would be looking at?
Quality is the same. They're all this year's crop. The difference is these lovely rains that we've been having actually tend to stain the beans a little bit. So again, same pinto beans. They're from the same valley, so they're within 50 miles of each other. These ones here are just a little bit wetter. These are a little drier. As the rain comes and the pod gets wet, it does change the actual dry bean. These ones were ready to combine and the grower couldn't get to the field. Therefore, whenever they came in, they're just obviously darker. These ones here will have to have a different market than these here.
This is indicative of farm to table, and this looks like a lot of work, a lot of tedious work. This shows how much pride you have in your work here.
Absolutely. I mean, this literally is the one step that from the farmer to the table. This, we just get to decide where they go. A lot of that goes to whichever market we send them to, whichever grocery store, if you will, they go to. So it's important that we watch everything that comes through so that we can get our customers the best product available.
Joining me now is Sarah Hammond. Sarah's the science producer here at Arizona Public Media. Sarah, great to have you back on the program.
Thanks for asking.
This week we're talking about rain. We had some rain, even hail earlier this week.
Right.
Is that connected to El Nino?
Not yet.
Okay. Talk about how that, some people might see that and think, well, it's winter, isn't it? Or is it still late fall?
Well, it's very much still fall. El Nino is a wintertime phenomenon.
Okay.
The experts that I've been hearing from are saying December, January is really when the circulation patterns set up in the Pacific, and that's when we'll expect to see these greater intensity storms come through.
Okay, so we're really looking at the December timeframe and on.
Correct.
All right. So This is expected to be one of the strongest on record because there are two others that we've seen in the past that were just as strong and healthy.
Right. 97, 98 was the largest, and then 82, 83. And again, the climatologists are saying this is among the top three. So this could rival the number one El Nino event from a few years ago.
And so we're expecting lots of flooding? Is that correct?
It's possible. Again, it depends on the intensity of the storms and where they hit, but certainly the greatest concern is in California. It's obviously coastal with the wildfires there. The federal experts are really very, very concerned about California. But the El Nino effect is going to stretch all the way across the country to the East Coast and up the Atlantic seaboard.
We heard Ken Drews from the National Weather Service say that they've been monitoring this since maybe the spring of 2014. How else is this monitored? Is this climate phenomena watched?
Interestingly enough, NASA has had 19 Earth orbiting missions launched since that 97, 98 phenomenon. So there are all kinds of eyes in the skies. Some of the things they're looking at are sea surface temperatures, sea surface height, surface currents, atmospheric winds. So there's a whole range of climate points that they're looking at.
And this is very new, so it's helpful in preparing.
Absolutely, the more information, the better. All that data is going to be crunched and help the climatologists figure out exactly what we're in for.
As you said earlier, there are really some eyes in the skies or eyes on the planet for us. You sat in on a press conference today, and they're talking about how we, on the ground, prepare for something like this.
This media briefing this morning was one of the most somber and solemn I have ever heard. It was FEMA and NOAA. And basically, they're saying, take this threat seriously. And we don't often hear that from government officials. Obviously, there's the potential for great danger, just destruction, flooding, and they just want people to be ready and to prepare. So that's really FEMA's role, Federal Emergency Management Administration, and they offered some tips and some websites to help people get ready and think about this.
One website is ready.gov.
Right, ready.gov has information about preparing for any kind of disaster, whether it's an ice storm or tornado. Great tips on preparing. But a point they really made was to encourage people to get flood insurance. And there's another website called floodsmart.gov. You can put in your street address, it will pop up and let you know the potential risk that you face, and then it gives some information about getting flood insurance. These experts said this today, even if you only buy flood insurance for 1 year, have your policy for a year, get it because it could protect you. And renters can get flood insurance for the contents of their property. So even if they don't own their home, they can get coverage to help any damages they may face.
Something we don't often think about in the desert. Okay,
Right.
Sarah Hammond, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that's our program. Thank you for joining us. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera.